Michael Schiavo refused to grant them guardianship because he was intent on seeing her executed. The question remains, why was it so important for him to have Terri die? It wasn't the hundreds of thousands of dollars he squandered away in paying lawyers to assert her murder. It had to be something more. Could it have been that he, himself, was responsible for her condition, and that he did not want her to be able to receive any kind of therapy which might have granted her a means of communicating the accounts of the morning of February 25th, 1990? Why wouldn't he simply go on with his new life, wife, and family, and allow Terri's parents, who loved her dearly, to simply take over her care? It seemed to me that if he really loved her, he would allow her parents and others to try and do all they could for her. But instead, he fought so hard and expended so much just to starve and dehydrate her. It must mean he had something to hide, and Terri's death meant secret kept. While some may discount the possibility that Michael Schiavo may have been the reason for Terri being in the condition she was in, this account had been verified and given credence to by one of our nation's top forensic pathologists, Dr. Michael Bodden, who has written 3 books on forensic pathology. In an interview with Fox News' Greta Van Susteren, Bodden claimed, quote, "Terri's condition could not have been caused by a potassium deficiency. It's extremely rare for a 20-year-old to have a cardiac arrest from low potassium who has no other diseases, which she doesn't have. The reason that she's in the state she's in is because there was a period of time, maybe 5 or 8 minutes, when not enough oxygen was going to her brain. That can happen because the heart stops for 5 or 8 minutes, but she had a healthy heart, from what we can see." End quote. Dr. Bodden then addressed a 1991 bone scan report done by Dr. Walker Campbell 13 months after Terri's alleged collapse due to a cardiac arrest. Quote, "The bone scan describes her having a head injury, and head injury can lead to the vegetative state that Mrs. Schiavo is in now. That her injuries are consistent with the severe trauma possibly caused by a beating, and that the injuries in medical records warrant an immediate investigation into the cause of her condition." End quote. The bone scan does show evidence that there are other injuries, other bone fractures that are in a healing stage in 1991. Those injuries could have happened, Bodden continued, from some kind of trauma. The trauma could have been from an auto accident, the trauma could be from a fall, or the trauma could be from some kind of beating that she obtained from somebody somewhere. It's something that should have been investigated in 1991, and maybe it was by police at that time." End quote. In a radio interview with Anaz, Terri's brother Bobby Schindler Jr. described their family's concern. Anaz: "What is your belief about what caused this collapse?" Bobby: "Well, at the time we weren't certain. I didn't suspect that her husband could possibly be behind it. We were all very concerned with her well-being, but it wasn't until recently, last year, that some very disturbing, troubling medical evidence surfaced which raises questions. It's something my father had suspected for a long, long time, a lot longer than I had, that Michael could possibly have been behind Terri's collapse." Anaz: "So that it may have been physically brought on? Now there are apparently x-rays that show bone fractures and things like that?" Bobby: "That is correct. That's what the terrible truth is. That surfaced, I believe, in November of 2002. Bone scans indicated severe trauma throughout Terri's body." Anaz: "What have the doctors, have they said?
what they believe may have caused her to collapse. Bobby: well, it's never been investigated. That's one of the things that we're trying to get done. Get investigated. Give to state attorneys in Florida. We went there. They also have a doctor's testimony who said that he has only, I forgot his name, but he came across only one other person who had the same neck position as Terri, and that person's neck position was caused by strangulation. So he persists and saw the bone scan, very troubled by the new evidence, along with quite a bit of circumstantial evidence that supports the notion that Terri could possibly have been strangled.
Dr. Campbell deduced in 1991 that Terri may have had a suspected closed head injury that led to her condition, and not as a result of cardiac arrest due to low potassium levels from an apparent eating disorder. Campbell wrote in his report, quote, "This patient has a history of trauma. The presumption is that the other multiple areas of trauma also relate to previous traumas." Campbell listed apparent injuries to the ribs, thoracic vertebrae, both sacroiliac joints, both ankles, and both knees, end quote. Dr. William Hamasfar, a Nobel Prize nominee for working in neurology, testified under oath that Terri's neck injuries are consistent with only one type of injury, that of strangulation.
She had a very, very stiff neck. Now, the neck was stiff in a fashion that was consistent with a brand new injury to the neck.
A brand new injury. In other words, it wasn't an old injury or anything like that.
No.
So, when you
that
say
is still damaged now 15 years later.
When you say brand new injury at the time, that means there must have been some trauma or accident. How do you get a neck injury? What could explain such a neck injury? I mean, medically speaking, what are the? I mean, she didn't fall down a flight of stairs. There's no record of Michael Schiavo. You know, she was in the apartment. There weren't any stairs inside.
Yeah.
Or I don't know that. Maybe on 2 floors.
I've only seen that kind of injury once before in my entire career, where you had on her physical scan, she's got a combination of what looks like a spinal cord injury, a brain injury, and a neck injury. And I've only seen that kind of pattern once before in my entire life, and that was in an attempted strangulation case. Yeah, and it's interesting that the new guardian that was appointed, Mr. Wolfson or Dr. Wolfson,
yes,
not an MD. He apparently only saw her for about 10 or 15 minutes too, and also after she was probably sedated.
Now, he was appointed, obviously, in response to the recent enactment of the Terry's Law, to assess the situation, see if there was any chance of recovery. Didn't he make some recommendations for Terry?
Yeah, he did. His main recommendation was to go ahead and start to do some swallowing tests on her to see if she can swallow, which we know she can do now. Just like she can do it, she's not sedated.
She doesn't drool or anything like that?
No, she doesn't drool. You know, people make about 1.5 to 2 liters of saliva, roughly saliva and food nasal trip a day, and they swallow it. They have swallowing difficulties with liquid, which is the toughest thing to swallow. If they're swallowing difficulties with liquid, then that saliva goes into the lungs and causes pneumonia.
But she doesn't have pneumonia, does she?
Correct. She doesn't drool, she doesn't have pneumonia, she swallows fine.
So what you're saying is this whole thing about Terry swallowing or having problems with swallowing may be a red herring or a bogus issue. Certainly if she has therapy, there's a good chance for her to have full swallowing ability, even if there's any doubt about it.
Yeah.
So that the idea of the feeding tube or being restricted to the feeding tube, medically speaking, is it's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense.
Well, the feeding tube was put in for nursing convenience. It was never put in because she couldn't swallow. It was put in because it just took too long to feed her.